And welcome to the Krueg Show. After Giants baseball, Giants get a win in Cleveland to begin the road trip, beating the former Indians, now the Guardians, at Progressive Field in Cleveland. Exciting baseball game. Giants dialing up the long ball, winning at 4-1 behind Carlos Rodon. Good evening to everybody. Larry Krueger, joined by former Giants assistant GM Ned Colletti, former Dodger general manager. Ned, good to see you.
Good to see you again, Larry. Good to be back.
Yeah, I love that. Love that man cave you got going there. Let's talk before we get into this game. Today is Jackie Robinson Day across Major League Baseball, and it's baseball. Obviously, you got to. Baseball is very proud of its history. I think in a lot of ways. Because baseball led the integration movement, and Jackie Robinson was a huge part of that, breaking the color barrier in the 1947 season for the Brooklyn Dodgers. And obviously, it's a I'm sure a great deal of pride for the Dodger organization. But 75 years to this day after he made his major league debut. He was honored around Major League Baseball with everybody wearing the blue 42 today. And what an incredible story. I mean, Ned, to me, one of my favorite movies of all time is the late Chadwick Boseman playing Jackie Robinson in 42. And the story is an incredible story. I mean, he was a four-sport athlete at UCLA. It really, his breaking of the color barrier in the late 40s, decades before I was ever born, set off the integration movement, the integration of a nation, really. And it cannot be undersold. It's not just one of the greatest days or one of the biggest days and most monumental days in baseball history, but in American history, and American history beyond the sports realm, because it really kind of took the lead in sport. It was an example where sports took the lead, where we needed to progress, and sports took the lead. And I think everybody associated with sports should be proud of that. And of course, somebody like yourself who has an association with the Dodger organization, Ned, um, talk to us about being the GM of the Dodgers and what this day means around baseball, but what it means for that organization, and what it means for anybody wearing Dodgers across their chest.
Well, I got to tell you that I took the GM job in November of '05, and I knew when I took the job that I was sitting in a seat that was very special, the seat that Branch Rickey, not literally but figuratively, sat in to make the decisions that he made. And I think, as you stated, I think you're right on. It wasn't. It was landmark the decision and opportunity in baseball, but it was really something that changed America and started America on a path to really have equality for everybody. And it wasn't lost on me that that's what the organization stood for, and that's what the organization continues to stand for, and continues to try and be a somebody that's a group that is very much involved in social issues and social justice. I never had a chance to meet Jackie. I met Roy Campanella once at Cooperstown before he passed, and I've met Rachel Robinson many times, and their family many times. But somebody who I was very close with was Don Newcomb, and Don Newcomb came to Brooklyn a little bit after Jackie, and they were buddies and roommates. And so they both saw the same thing that was going on, and it was not an easy time for players of color to really have a peaceful existence almost. And I probably had 500 conversations with Don through 11, 12 years before he passed a couple years ago. And 80, 90% of them were really based upon life and not baseball. And it wasn't lost on me what he went through and what Jackie went through to really start to play a game that they were held out of, not because of ability, but because of skin color, which is, hard to believe today, hard to believe then too. But obviously, a lot of different things that have transpired since started that day. As far as the number 42 goes, I think Ken Griffey Jr. may have been the player that started the idea that every team should be represented with, I think it was one player wearing 42. And I always had the tough time of figuring out who was going to wear that number, because a lot of players wanted to wear it. And one time, about the day before the April 15th celebration, I went to our owner, Frank McCourt, and said, I got an idea. I mean, we're the Dodgers. Everybody on our team should be wearing 42. I shouldn't have to pick one player or have one player out of the 25-man roster. The roster was 25 back then. As designated as the player that's going to honor Jackie Robinson. And he agreed, and he called Commissioner Seelig, and Commissioner Seelig gave us the go ahead to have everybody in our organization that played that day or was on the roster to wear number 42. And now you see it at the game where every player wears number 42. So kind of a little footnote to the story, but something that I thought was not only proper but really fitting to do on behalf of the Robinson family, baseball, and people of diversity to everybody. Let's work together to get everything as good as we can make it.
They're supposedly, I never have seen it. You maybe have. There's supposedly a picture that used to, hang in Dodger Town in Vero Beach of Jackie Robinson between third and home and a rundown. And there's
Yes,
like
I know the
seven,
picture.
yeah, there's like
Yeah,
seven different players in the rundown. And it just kind of showed the impact that his athleticism, his speed had on the game in the late 40s. Um, but it is interesting to see where baseball has gone. Baseball is far more a global sport than it's ever been. And it was something that Jackie obviously pushed for during his playing career. But in watching if watching so many of those different baseball seasons shows that you see on different seasons from the 60s and 70s, he was still making appearances on baseball diamonds around the big leagues, and and his impact on the game was consistently felt. And if you hear the guys, the generation Ned that came after him, which many of us have met, the Willie Mazes and the
yes,
Hank Aaron's and the Frank Robinsons and the Veda Pinsons and the Joe Morgans and so on and so forth. Jackie was a transformative figure in their lives, and they had a deep appreciation for the struggles that he went through, and the fact that he paved the way for them for greater inclusion in the game. So I just think it's a great story. It's great that baseball honors him. He was honored all throughout baseball today in a number of different ways, and it's just a really cool thing. I think that baseball should have done this earlier, but at this point, we could debate that forever. It's much what is most important is they're honoring him now and moving forward, and that they continue to honor his widow and his memory.
yes, was a phenomenal player, as you mentioned that picture from that World Series game. Kind of draws a little bit of attention to it. And as you also said, a four sport athlete at UCLA. Baseball was his poorest sport, believe it or not.
Wow.
He was a great track runner, a great basketball player, great football player. Baseball was the sport that was number four out of the four, but he was special at everything he did. One other thing too, talking to Don Newcomb about him for many times, Dr. Martin Luther King met with Jackie and Roy Campanella and Don Newcomb many times over a meal, different things. And when Dr. King gave the famous "I Have a Dream" speech, Jackie Robinson was standing within about 10 feet of him. And so a lot of history there, but Dr. King told Jackie and Nuke and Campanella that, you three gentlemen and Larry Doby in the American League had done as much for the civil rights movement as anybody in American history, that it drew attention to it, and that he could have done all the marches he wanted to do, but it wouldn't have had the impact that the game of baseball changing had for them. And so I think it's a key moment and something that is obviously a special day. And hopefully we continue to make great strides across the globe.
No question. And I think the conditions are clearly far better today. Obviously, it's an integrated game, it's an integrated world, largely. But earlier this week we had an issue here in San Francisco between Mike Schilt and Antone Richardson, where there wasn't necessarily a race related deal, though that's, I guess, a matter of your perspective because some people felt it was, but they held a joint news conference. I don't know how much you saw of Giants Padres earlier this week, but there was some back and forth that went on, and we'll
Yeah.
talk about the unwritten rules of baseball because it was kind of tied to that. But there was some, there was some bad blood early in the season between two division rivals, and at one point, Schilt yelled something that he felt, that Anton Richardson felt had kind of racial overtones to it, and he stated as much in the post game. And the two of them the next morning sat down, talked it out, came to some kind of understanding, and then held a joint press conference where Antone kind of expressed how he felt, where he was coming from. Mike Schultz gave an answer. I don't know that it was a great answer because he kind of stammered around, but he did address it somewhat. And obviously, to the satisfaction of Richardson, and the two sides moved on. Give me your perspective. I don't know that Richardson or Schultz all that well, but
Mhm.
did you notice? Did you see that story from afar? And
Yeah.
what'd you make of how it was handled?
Well, I was sad that it occurred when I saw it and read about it. Obviously, it's something nobody wants to have happen. And I was glad the next day. I did not see the press conference, and I read about it. And I was glad to see that they came to what seems like a healthy conclusion to it, and they both had a chance to express their positions, which is obviously smart. And I think it's always important that while we don't know what somebody else has gone through, and we don't know what their walk has been and what their life has been, that we understand that, and that we can't think that everybody has grown up the way we have or does things the way we do. I think we have to be open minded, but we also have to be able to take a breath once in a while and understand that, hey, just because we see something one way and we're going to say something that we don't think has any bearing, we got to remember who we're saying it to, because it can make a drastic difference as it did in that setting that you described. But I think it's part of what we all need to do is really take an understanding of everybody and understand that none of us, except maybe a couple of us, grew up the way we grew up. Everybody's grown up differently. You grew up different than I grew up, and on and on. And so I think it's very important that we as a world take a breath once in a while and understand that not everybody has the same background or comes from the same place or understands things the same way that we do. That there's a vast variety of things, and we need to be wise with the words we choose.
Yeah. And when there are disagreements or there are things that come to a head or there are issues that bubble up, keep talking. Don't just
Yes.
everybody go to their own corner and hunker down and listen to some echo chamber. Go, keep talking, keep the dialogue going because if we keep talking, I think ultimately we're gonna reach positive conclusions and we're gonna find out that what, we're a whole lot more alike than we are different. I think that was clear. What do you think of the game tonight? Giants went to Cleveland to begin the road trip. Carlos Rodon's second start. Man, Rodon, the Giants 1 week in, Ned, the Giants rotation looks outstanding, and Rodon is leading the way, and he was really good tonight in Cleveland.
Well, that was outstanding tonight. It's he's got a wide variety of pitches. I saw him a little bit when he was in the American League, but certainly not as much as we're about to see him now. What I thought was really impressive is he started to struggle a little bit as he got over that 80 pitch mark, and Cleveland had its one real rally of the game at that point in time, and that's when they cut the lead from 2-0 2-1 and had first and third to start the inning with nobody out. But what I thought was really impressive is that he dialed it up to 98 and 99 about halfway through the 80s, and that's tough to do. But he can pitch and he knows what he's doing. He's not just a velocity guy. He understands pitching. He understands swing path. He understands the anxiety of hitters. I thought that he was outstanding tonight. And you're right, the rotation has been very, very good through the first week of the season. That's a good sign because if you can pitch, you can win. If you can't pitch, you can't win.
Yeah. No, the Giants pitching, starting pitching especially, looks really, really good. The Giants, Ned, with the win tonight, are 13-2 in their last 15 on the road. What's the key to getting it done on the road in your I mean, is there a key, or is it's no different? Do you have any philosophies or anything that you felt like all the years that you've had in baseball that you thought, you know what, this is kind of the common denominator of teams that do win on the road?
Well, I think it's a handful of things. I think certainly you have to execute, and I think it helps to score early. Maybe get yourself a lead, take the crowd out a little bit. I think that's certainly in April. You've got a different type of crowd than you're going to have in September. But I think if you can get that lead and take the crowd out of it, a little bit of anxiety on the other side, you've got a chance to win a game. But you're going to have to execute as time goes on, and you're going to have to pitch. Obviously, you're pitching the bottom half of every inning. So, you're already done offensively. You've got to be able to hold serve, so to speak, defensively and really pitch and really, really command your pitches, not fall behind, and you need great defense. I think teams that fall behind early on the road do not execute, do not make good pitches, and end up falling behind counts and running up that pitch count. I think those are the teams that go 2-15 out of 17 road games. I think you get an early lead, execute your pitching with your pitching staff. You understand the dynamics of the road and the lack of familiarity with the ballpark. Sometimes, if you're in the NL West, sure, you've been all over the place for years. So maybe a little bit of a change here and there, but by and large, the stadiums. You get outside of the NL West, if you're the Giants, you're the Dodgers, you got to pay attention to a lot of different things. But getting that lead early and being able to execute all the way through is always a good thing to do, home or road. But I think especially on the road, because you can take that crowd out of it a little bit.
Crawford went deep for the Giants to get him on the board. Jock Peterson hit the 150th home run of his career to give him a 2-0 lead. I got to ask you about Crawford, because this guy was a good player when they won 3 World Series. He's a much better player now. And it's funny, we did an interview with him, Ned, in September. And, I asked him about the fact that he's this dramatically better hitter now. I mean, he's a much better offensive player than he was when they won the World Series. And he said, we always had good information, like the last regime with Sabes running the show, Bobby Evans, yourself prior to Bobby. They always had in his mind good analytic information, good advanced information. But he said, Larry, last year, the information that we got was so much better. It was so much more detailed. And all I can think of is that, so maybe they, for like, let's say defensive positioning, they're perfecting their spray charts. Instead of just taking every at bat, they're actually having somebody look at each one of those at bats, and then they're taking out the ones that are the aberration, and they're perfecting their spray charts. I think that probably helps them defensively. But what do you make of the fact that the Giants went from the old regime and all those guys, Joe LaFay and Ronnie Wotus, and firsthand, those guys all are wearing rings, and they brought in a whole bunch of people. And a lot of these guys are young, very young in their career. Some of them just had college experience, and they come in and they're grinding all kinds of analytics, and they're forcing their analytics to come to the field, which is, I think, why they're there in the first place. Farhan wants his analytics played out on the field. And he doesn't want it played out 80% of the time. He wants it played out 100% of the time. He kind of wants to manage. I don't want to say manage, because that sounds like he's trying to do Gabe's job, but you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. They want their analytics to play out on the field every night for all 9 innings. But Crawford said to me, he said, you know what? The information that we got this year and with this new regime is even more detailed, and it's better than ever. And we have, we're looking at it, tighter and more, better, more than we ever have. Does that surprise you that this new regime that doesn't have World Series rings, that's made up of a lot of young coaches, that they're providing information to the ball players that even the veterans believe is an upgrade on what they had prior?
Not really. I think it doesn't surprise me. Farhan's very, very smart, and I was around him a little bit in LA. So I know him. I know him a little bit, but I do know that he's very, very intelligent, and he sees things in a different way than a lot of people. I think what has changed in and the analytics have been around for a while, but what has really changed in the last couple of years is really where they make it precise for the player. I think if you ask Brandon about it, what he is hearing is not necessarily, some of it is in a group meeting, but there's probably sit down meetings where they tell him exactly what he's doing. I know the Dodgers have done it for a long time with their pitching, where they, that's why they're always, and you see the same thing with the Giants now with Farhan, where they'll take a player, so let's say a pitcher that has not had a lot of success someplace. Maybe most of their career has been a lot of expectation without a lot of fulfillment of expectation. And suddenly now they start to figure it out. And I think what they've done with the analytic world is not just blanket the entire team with information. Maybe they do to some extent, but they're probably going one-on-one and sitting down with the player and saying, this is where we see a weak spot. This is where we see a strength. This is where we see you do something that if you adjusted it this way, you might be a lot better. I'm sure the algorithms that they have and the different examples they have can really teach a player how to get better. And I'm assuming that is part of what the change has been for Crawford and for others. It's tough to change a player, but if you have some information that is succinct and really gets to the point, and there's examples attached to it, I think you can make a vast difference in how a player thinks and how they play. I think he's a great example of it. And your comment about the defensive shifts and how you play defense and stuff, I think the spray charts have always been around.
Sure.
Since my first days, they were around. But it almost seemed like the thing to do was not shift. Only against somebody who was really a dead pull hitter would you do that. But now you see all sorts of different shifts, and you also see them, to your point of how it's really advanced. I've seen players change position at different points in the count. You'll see somebody go from the left side of the infield to the right side of the infield when there's two strikes or when there's a 2-1 count. You see all different combinations, which is very interesting. I don't know how much, I don't know what the percentage of success is with it, but it's interesting that I would see a player move 100 feet one way or the other, like a totally different position, and do it because it's a different count. But the amount of information that there is, coupled with the number of games you play, it has got to be vitally succinct. You're not going to be able to sit there for an hour with each player day after day after day and go through it. Impossible. But in small little increments, I think there's great lessons to be learned. And we've seen a lot of players that have gotten better across baseball that were maybe struggling to stay in the big leagues or struggling to really become a more than average player. Yeah, we've seen a lot of it, but Crawford's a great example.
You look at the Giant rotation ERA coming into today, Ned, 2.53. The starting pitchers had 43 strikeouts in 32 innings. When you're a GM and you're putting together a rotation, do you need a one or two guys in your rotation who's going to strike a lot of guys out? And do you, if you had a rotation of guys that pitch to contact, would you then, as a GM, say, you know what, I'm looking for a guy who's going to pile up strikeouts? Because it just seems like this, watching the Giants this week, they've gotten a lot of strikeouts from Cobb, a lot of strikeouts from Rodon. We know Webb can strike out people at a decent clip. The Giants, I can't remember too many rotations they've had through the years where they had this kind of punch out potential. And it's noticeable as far as the load that it takes off of the defense.
Well, the great former Giant, Billy Miller, used to tell me all the time, there's only one thing worse than a strikeout, and that's a double play.
Right.
Because a strikeout gets you nothing as an offensive team. So I think that if you do have guys that can strike hitters out, that's good. I think there has to be a blend between the strikeout and having an efficient inning too. It doesn't do you much good to strike out the side, but throw 15, 18 pitches an inning either. So you've got to have the mix. And sometimes you need that ground ball for the double play. Sometimes you need a quick out. But I think that and a lot of hitters today strike out. Strikeout is not as uncommon as it is the last 5 or 6 years. So some of the time the hitters are giving a pitcher a break too by swinging at what they swing at. But I think as you watch games this year, and as you watch teams like Cleveland. Dodgers are playing Cincinnati right now. You're watching teams that have really traded off some of their best players, some of their best pitchers, and you see the difference of somebody who cannot command the pitch, cannot make an efficient pitch, a good strike, not just a strike, but a good strike, and to pinpoint it around. And I think that's where the teams are going to all get separated. Is it good to have strikeout guys on your staff? No doubt. Is it good to have efficient pitching on your staff? No doubt. Carlos today, very efficient. Big news earlier this week. Kershaw had a perfect game through 80 pitches, took him out of the game. 80 pitches, 7 innings, no base runners. Obviously efficient. I think the efficiency of your work is the most important. But I do think there are certain situations in games, and we've talked about this earlier with your relief pitchers, especially in the 10th inning and on when you start with a runner on, that you need that strikeout. I think it's a good balance to do it one or the other, a little bit of both.
Joey Bart, man, what a start he's had, huh? I mean, he just put a charge into that baseball, and man, I was hoping that he would progress from last year to this year. You always expect a young player to progress somewhat, but he's made a dramatic step forward from what we saw a year ago, and none too soon, right? They need him to. I mean, he's got huge shoes to fill. Nobody's expecting him to be able to fill it defensively, but man, if he can continue to be a force offensively, man, that's going to give Gabe some options because right now I think the plan was, you know what, just go with Joey and hit him ninth, maybe hit him eighth, bury him in the lineup. Don't worry about his offense, but if he continues to swing the bat like this, he'll be hitting in the middle of the lineup.
Yes, he's had an outstanding opening to this season, in a new job, really.
Yeah.
Not a new position, but certainly a new responsibility. Been excellent for the club doing what he's doing. It is, and it's a long year, and there's going to be a lot of different things that are going to come up as time goes on. But you would rather have one of your best prospects, especially a catching prospect, get some confidence early and start to be productive early. And the pitching staff has been great. Starters have been great. So, a little bit of credit probably goes to him too, because he's probably gotten some guys through tough innings. I'm sure that they're not calling it their entire game, that he's got some say in that as well. So it's a learning experience. It's going to be day to day. I think I said last week on the show that, by the time it gets to September, October with Joey, he'll be overwhelmed with how much he has learned about the pace of the game, how different things happen. And, hopefully for him, he's going to have himself a year that he looks back on and marvels at really how well he did. But the amount of education that he's going to have between now and the last game the Giants play, it'll be more than he's probably ever learned in the sport.
If you were the Giants GM this year, how concerned would you be? They had a 17-game Cactus League, very abbreviated Cactus League, and everybody had the same. But the Giants opened this year, Ned, I think with 19 games in 21 days. I was looking at the schedule this week. They play 4 in New York against the Mets after the weekend series, and then they immediately start another 3-game series against the Nationals in D.C. 19 out of 21 days, very little rest at the beginning of the year. If you're going to have a stretch like that, would you want it, to start the year, or would you want it later in the year?
Well, you're going to have it at some point in time.
Sure.
I think the way I would look at a tough schedule early, especially after a spring that was abbreviated, is we got to get through those first 3 weeks injury free if we can, with hardly anybody really getting banged up. That would be the most important thing, and try and hold serve, so to speak, and to stay in it. Because if you can stay in it for the 3-week period of time, that may be your toughest, maybe your second toughest. I haven't looked at their schedule that closely, but there are certain times of a season that you look at it when the season comes out and we're going to have to weather this storm. We're going to have to get through this period of time. Sabes and I used to always look at the schedule and hope that we were in Atlanta and Florida, for example, and the East Coast, because Philly and Washington can get really hot and humid in August, that if we had older teams, that we would be through with those cities by the time we got to that time of the summer. We'd rather play a New York in April or May. We'd rather play a Washington in April or May, a Florida and Atlanta in April and May, rather than have it come in late in the season where you're starting to get tired and some of your veterans are starting to feel it. But everybody's going to play the same amount of games. You're all going to play at the same point in time. I think it's if you have an easy schedule and you can take advantage of it, that gives you a little bit of a push. If you have a tough schedule and you can take advantage of that and stay close and get through that tough part, that will pay a dividend later on when the other teams have got to go and do what you've just done. But keeping everybody healthy through the first 3 weeks of the season, I think, is on everybody's mind. 28 players, not 26, and not 25 from a couple of years ago. So you've got a little bit more to work with, but you still got to keep guys healthy.
It's funny. It is kind of, it's not just, who you play. It's kind of when you get them, that,
Yes.
that kind of matters. I mean, like I would not want to play Colorado early in April. Why? Because it just seems like in early April, they still have hope. You get them late in the year after they've been beaten down and you can go in there and knock them around. And it's the Giants beat them rhythmically towards the end of the last year, but man, they look good against the Dodgers in this first week of the season. And it's interesting, Ned. It's like, I don't know if it's Coors Field, but it just seems like the Rockies they've started a number of years with a good first week, a good 10 days, and then they hit a snag and it's like a free fall. And so to me, they're like the one team I wouldn't want to play in the first week of the season. How much of that Rockies Dodgers series did you see? What do you think of them out of the chute so far, Colorado?
Well, I think you're right on. I think that they compete. They always compete, but they do run out of pitching as the year goes on. And April's typically a good time for them because they get their offense rolling and they can put some runs up on the board in that ballpark. I think your point on as the season goes on, playing a team like Colorado or other teams. We talked about Cincinnati. We talked about Cleveland right now, and there's other teams too. They're pitching right now, not necessarily right now, but really close to right now. It's as good as it's going to be. You may have some guys that get a little bit better as the year goes on, but you're going to have far more that don't get a whole lot better. And when you have young pitching, the drag of a major league season, the grind of a major league season tests everything you've got, especially if you've got young pitching. So even if you've got a really good young pitcher, there's going to come a time in that season where they're not going to have anything left. And I think I would love to see, I would always look at where those tough segments of time were 21 days in a row, or like you say, you start the season after an abbreviated spring, you're playing 19, real close together there. I would also look at what my September schedule looked like. And when you get to September, obviously you're going to have expanded rosters. The teams that have lost 90 games already by the time they get to Labor Day, they are counting the minutes to get home. Okay.
Yeah.
They are, you can get an early lead on them in a game, and chances of them coming back, very, very slim. Chances of them having enough pitching to make a pitch, very, very slim. So all those things I see as great advantages for the good teams. You get into September and you're playing somebody whose pitching staff has got an ERA at 5.5, and that was in the early part of a season and the middle part of a season when guys had more energy and more life to their game. You could really put some runs up when you get later on into it because you got to be able to pitch. And the good teams like the Giants last year, the Dodgers for a while, and when you watch their games, the longer the game goes, the more it's almost something crazy has got to happen for the team without the pitching to survive it and win it. Guys got to get themselves out as hitters. Guys are going to hit a lot of line drives into gloves. Different things are going to happen. But by and large, when you cannot pitch and you struggle to throw strikes, the game will find you. I've said it 1,000 times watching Dodger games. The game is too long for the opposition. Last night, Dodgers had a 3-run lead. Cincinnati fought back, clawed back to tie it. By the time they got into their bullpen after they tied a 3-3, Dodgers just kept pounding them and getting runs. Giants did the same thing. So you've got to be able to pitch. And a game like that is kind of the microcosm of the season. The longer the season goes, the teams that cannot pitch and do not have a lot of quality to their pitching staff, the guys that fall behind all the time and got to pitch out of a stretch all the time, by the time you get to Labor Day, they're about done. They got not much left to give.
Yeah. Ned Colletti with us. We're having a good time after Giants baseball, and we're about halfway through with our show. So let's thank our sponsors or mention our sponsors here. Telmetrics. Co. If you're an orthopedic surgeon, an occupational therapist, a chiropractor, a physical therapist, Telmetrics is designed for you to use in your practice and will greatly benefit your patients. Telmetrics uses computer vision and artificial intelligence and provides a platform for outpatient rehab therapy services, both in clinical and telehealth environments. Using Telemetrics can improve your patient's experience and much more. So, for all your sports injury and physical rehabilitation specialists, be sure you go to Telmetrics.co. And we thank Casey Bateman and the people there at Telmetrics for being a sponsor of the Krueg Show. We also want to thank our other sponsor, the great Dan Coach Emilio. You can reach Dan today at 925-628-9966. He is a retirement planning specialist. His website is securemoney.com. And these are uncertain times. You want to make sure your money is taken care of. So that's really it. And you want to make sure that your money's safe for your retirement. So Danny's got 25 years of experience in this field. He's a big time Bay Area native, Giants fan, Niner fan, Warrior fan, and he can help you right now get an immediate 10% premium bonus on your principal retirement account. Give him a call. He's at 925-628-9966. And make sure you're putting your money where it is secure. Once again, Dan Coach Emilio, retirement planning specialist, securemoney.com, 925-628-9966. And we thank them for being sponsors of the Krueg Show. All right, before we hit the chat, let's hit some of these headlines from around the game this week. You mentioned Clayton Kershaw. Why don't we start there? Kershaw's 34. He got pulled from a perfect game Wednesday against the Twins. And Kershaw has said that Dave Roberts made the right call. So it wasn't like there's a big disagreement here. It was his season debut. He had the elbow injury last October. They pulled him after 80 pitches. He had struck out 13, and he only had 6 outs remaining in this perfect game. He's only the second pitcher to go 7 and get yanked in a perfect game. Oddly enough, Dave Roberts pulled both guys because it was Rich Hill was the other one a few years back. Hill had a blister, though, I believe, and got pulled from that game. Roberts, though, took both pitchers out. Kershaw's on a 1-year deal right now for $17 million. He's a 3-time Cy Young and a 1-time MVP. He did throw a no-hitter already in his career in 2014. All right. I mean, Ned, we're in a different era, and, I don't know. Everybody thinks differently on these things. To me, if you got a perfect game, if I got a perfect game, I want to be left in. Especially if I've made the kind of money and I've had the kind of career that Clayton has. His family is for secure beyond belief. It's a unique situation. It's April. He's pitching. He's fresh. His stuff is fresh. He's at a point in his career where he's probably going to face some form of a decline if he hasn't already seen it. How many more opportunities is he going to have for this? What is there, 24 in the history of the game or whatever it is, 26, whatever. It's a very low number. If I'm Kershaw, I want to stay in that game, but it's a different time. It's a different era. Give me your perspective. Dave Roberts, Kershaw. I'm sure you've thought about this many times in the last couple of days because it's been a hotly debated topic in Southern California. Where do you weigh in?
Well, first of all, I think when I think about Clayton Kershaw, and I've known him since he was 18 years old, to me, a perfect game for him would be great, but it's like one more line on a great resume. I think he probably knew ahead of time, hey, you're going to go 80, 85 pitches. And maybe they even said, even if you've got a perfect game, you're going 80, 85 pitches. This organization looks long play all the time. They look long play every game. If they have a chance to do something that can preserve an arm, an inning, whatever, they do it. They think about October when they start spring training, and they plan accordingly. Last year, Walker Buehler went over 200 innings. Urias was close. Years before that, I'm not talking about 2020, they didn't have anybody getting close to 200 innings even. Because if they have a lead and they can get to their bullpen and they've got a vast array of arms like the Giants do, they got a vast array of arms both in the big leagues and at AAA. They can rotate guys in and out. Every inning is precious, and every inning that you can save gives you a chance to have another inning of quality later. It's not just enough to stay healthy. It's not just enough to be able to throw 180 innings and have that number written down someplace. These teams, the Giants are getting right there too. These teams look at October. That is where their season is defined. It's not defined in September or any month before September. If it is, it hasn't been a good year. Okay. And there's nothing they're going to be able to do about it. The way they look is we are planning and preparing for the month of October. We're going to keep guys fresh. We're going to keep guys, if it's an inning here, an inning there, no matter what it's going to do for their resume, that's what we're going to do. And they've done it time and time again. And for the most part, it's paid very well for them that they've been able to keep guys as fresh as possible. And one other thing, as you look at that team, their starting pitching is probably the only area that, if it was me, I would be a little bit concerned with. Okay, you're missing Trevor Bauer. Who knows how that's going to be? But you've got Furious, you've got Walker Buehler, and you've got Clayton, who had a limited season a year ago due to his left arm. After that, you got guys that are trying to make a difference. Andrew Heaney, guys like that. Okay, Tyler Anderson. Are they going to win 15, 18 games? Well, they may. But let's face it, the chances that they're going to do something like that are slim. So you cannot win without starting pitching. You cannot win without the bullpen. So are you going to risk somebody that's your Hall of Fame pitcher going out there to try and do one more thing, trying to get over some six out milestone to get your name in the record book? He's already in the record book. I think the most important thing to him is to win another championship. Like the guys in San Francisco, we talked about Crawford, 3 of them. He's looking for 2 of them, and he's looking for a parade, and he's looking for the celebration that the organization didn't get back in 2020. And so I think that is far more important to him and everybody else on that club than it is just having another line on your resume that's already Hall of Fame caliber.
It's interesting. Matthew on the chat says Bob Gibson would knock someone out if
There's no
they got
doubt.
pulled.
There's no doubt.
I mean, was Boch wrong leaving Bumgarner in the 2014 series?
I don't know.
It's a different way of thinking, right? It's a different way of thinking. That was a team accomplishment. This is an individual accomplishment. Does that make it different, maybe?
I think it does make a huge difference. And I think you have to take every aspect of that. Madison was younger than Clayton was on Wednesday, okay? Younger, a little bit bigger player, a little bit different physique as well. Somebody that didn't have, the injury history that Clayton has had the last couple of years. So there's a lot of different factors go into it. I agree with the person who just chimed in about Bob Gibson. There ain't no doubt Bob Gibson. Jack Morris in the World Series in '91. Tom Kelly get back in the dugout, in the 9th inning. So
what about Maddox? What would you knew Maddox from Cubs days, and with the Dodgers? Heck, you had him in both.
Giving the guy the ball, he would have said, "I'll see you in a minute."
Get out of here.
Yeah.
A couple other things that I think are interesting around baseball. Seiya Suzuki for the Cubbies, 27-year-old kid from Japan, hitting 368 or 363. He's hit 3 home runs, 10 RBIs, and 25 plate appearances. And he looks great, Ned. He's hitting the ball out the opposite field. Were you expecting Suzuki to make this kind of an impact?
Well, I wouldn't write it down in pen right yet. I knew he was a good hitter, was a good player. Obviously, his career in Japan was pretty spectacular. Not that it's the same thing as playing in the big leagues here, but certainly a lot of good ability that he needed to put into use here, and he has. And there's no denying it. Again, but it's tough for me after all these years to look at 7 or 8 games and put it down in ink that this is going to be. We're just going to prorate this for the next, 6 months.
Right.
It's tough to do. But, hey, you'd rather have a good start than not a good start, especially coming from a different place.
And new city, new teammates. How about this one? This one was interesting to me. Charlie Hayes' kid, Brian Hayes, great-looking young third baseman. Pirates signed him this week to an 8-year, $70 million deal. and it's an interesting structure. I was looking at the deal. It's 10 million this year. It's 10 million next year. Then in 2024 through 2027, the deal goes from 10 million down to 7 million. And then in 2028 and 2029, it goes up from 7 million to 8 million. But he's basically taking the money up front and and I would say not betting on himself a little bit, right? He's taking the guaranteed money, and the Pirates are saving money in the process. What do you think of contracts like that? Did you ever offer any young player, whether it be in LA or when you were doing contracts as Brian's right hand man here in San Francisco? Did you ever offer a young player a long-term deal to lock him in and try to buy out the arbitration years and have some cost certainty? And are you a fan of those kinds of deals? I mean, I always think about it, if that was my kid, I would say, you know what, your body is your livelihood, so you don't know when your body's going to break down. So, man, if somebody's going to give you generational wealth, take it and try to make it up on that second contract. But that's a very conservative approach, and many of these guys don't want to go that route. And a lot of times, there's stories of people in the union telling the players, don't go that route. Please don't go that route. Give me your perspective. You've done contracts in this league literally for decades.
Well, I think about a couple that I did do like that. One was with a young second baseman named Ryan Sandberg, um, before he signed his big deal at 28 for four. It turned out to be a great deal for the organization, but it also gave him security. Billy Miller, same thing. We signed him early to a 3 or 4 year deal. Couple years.
Bumgarner, Giants did it with Bumgarner. He signed
Yeah.
for, I think it was 5 years, 35 million, something like that. He probably
Yes.
could have made more on the back end.
It's it is one of those situations where, and I would do it. Maybe it's because I think that way financially, but I would take the guarantee. And if I was going to be young enough when it came to its conclusion to go out again as a free agent, you know, Charlie's son, what's he going to be? 30, 31 years old when he's a free agent? You can still go out and get another big deal. But to be able to have generational wealth and to have that security, and to be able to know that you're going to be in a good spot, no matter what happens, allows you to play freer, allows you to play without any restraint almost, trying to protect yourself against injury and things like that. So you do get paid, year by year by year. But I was a fan of it as an executive. As long as, and there's two sides to every story. You have to really know the player, and you have to really know that this player, no matter what you're paying them, that they are not going to lose their hunger for success, and that the relentless pursuit of excellence is going to just be stronger and stronger and stronger. And yeah, the pay is one thing, but I know players that just kind of lost their hunger once they got paid like that. I know other players that if the going rate was $1 and you were paying them $1, they would compete like it was $25 million. So it's both sides. But I think from a club's perspective, yes, you can save money, and yes, you can get ahead of the market, and you have cost certainty. So a lot of good things, but they don't mean anything if you sign the wrong player that's going to lose the hunger to it and is not going to work as hard as they've worked to get to that point. I've got guys on both sides of that equation. So you got to be careful with it, but you got to really know your player and know how they approach the game and how it's going to change them when they get paid like that. Same thing with free agency. Same thing with bringing somebody in. At least in Pittsburgh case, they know the player. They've had the player for a while, so they
Right.
know how he prepares. They know what it means to him. So that's what we have with Rhino, and that's what we had with Billy Miller with the Giants. We knew that Billy Miller was going to play every game like it was his last, and it was going to be all in all the time. Somebody like that, you never think twice about doing.
It is interesting though, because the name that I always think of is Jonathan Singleton, who played with the Astros, and they bought him out and gave him a deal, and he just never made it. He
Yeah,
never made it. So
I think the Phillies did it too with Kingery a couple of years ago.
Scott Kingery,
Yeah,
yeah. Um, okay, how about this one? Mauricio Debon bunted for a base hit in an 11-2 game in the sixth. And Krug and Kipe, instantly were like, no, wrong. And obviously Bob Melvin and the big Marine, Matt Williams, the former Giant. Oh man, Williams was hot, and Melvin was barking, and man, every guy in that Padre dugout was staring bullet holes through Dubon. Then he comes back to the dugout, and it looked like Kapler kind of sounded him out. It looked like it. But then in the post game, Kapler came out and said, "No, I'm supporting our guys. The game wasn't over, and we're going to play all 9 innings, and we're not trying to win today. We're trying to win this series. And so if we can go deeper into their pen by having them another rally, we're going to do it." And so he then kind of supported his guy. It's really a clash between eras because it's a different way of looking at things. And then it's funny too because then of course the social media dialogue starts and the people that are saying, "Man, Dubon shouldn't have done that," they're being called, "Oh, you're what's wrong with baseball," to the younger fans, or "You're the reason that baseball's dying because you don't want this." And so what did you think of it when you heard it? What would you think of it if a guy in your team laid down a bunt in a 9-2 game in the sixth or
Well,
11-2 game in the sixth?
I'd rather have him get a sharp single to center field, but
Okay, good honesty.
everybody's trying to compete, and it's a game. It's a team game, but everybody's also trying to to get their numbers, so to speak. So you're not going to go up there half-hearted. You're not going to go up there and not give it your all. And so you do what you got to do sometimes. I've heard the same argument if somebody has a no hitter late in the game that you're not supposed to bunt to try and get on. Isn't that a play? I mean, it's still a play.
Right.
You still got
Still
to
counts as a
execute the
hit.
play. Yeah. So I can see it both ways. I can see. I think that a team that is getting beat by that many runs, a little bit agitated anyway. Sometimes they're just looking for a reason to be a little bit more agitated, or to let some of the frustration out. But again, the game is so numbers oriented. You can't really blame somebody for, I guess, getting a hit that's a bun hit and not a strong single to the outfield.
How about the other thing that happened in the same game? They put Will Myers into pitch, and he gives up a couple bombs, and you got guys at the end of the knob swinging for the fences. You got a problem with that? I mean, should you swing for the fences against the left fielder who's pitching in the ninth? I mean, this is really tough. I was at a game in the 90s, and you were probably the Giants assistant GM at the time. It was probably late 90s. Expos rolled in, beat up on the Giants like 19-3. Rondell White hit a grand slam, I think hit for the cycle. Dusty was incensed, and I think he felt like they were stealing signs or they knew what was coming. Something. He was incensed. He felt like that they were kind of taking their liberties on the Giants that day. I don't know. I mean, where unwritten rules? Do you believe in them? Do you not believe in them? Did Sabes believe in them? Where did you guys? Was there any? Was there ever anything done against you in a game where you're like, man, that is Bush,
Well,
without
I'm
naming
sure.
necessarily the player or the team, where you
Yeah,
just felt like, man, come on, this game is over, or
I
how do you
think
how do you side?
I
Where
think
do you
it
weigh in on
happens
that?
every year. It happens, yeah, every year to some extent. The season's so long, it's going to happen. Um, the best revenge to me is to beat the team the next day. Nothing you're going to do about a 19-2 game anyway. They want to swing for the fences. Hey, good for them. The best revenge is to beat them the next time you got a chance to play them. That's the best way of doing it. And they know too that, hey, if you get a big lead, you're going to do the same thing. As far as hitters taking Will Myers out, you know why not? Why not try and do your best? Just because they bring in an outfielder to pitch, are you just supposed to play pepper with them and hit 1 to 3 ground outs until you get out of the inning? Hey, it's the team's choice who they're pitching, and you're a big league hitter. Another little factor to it all: when players try to do less to protect themselves or to protect a situation like that and not have anybody get irate, a lot of times that's when guys get hurt too.
Right.
I mean, you got to play full on all the time. That's what you're accustomed to doing. There ain't no halfway. There ain't no 90%, 80%. You got to play full way. And you know what? San Diego knows when they put Will Myers in. If he really had that good of stuff, he wouldn't be playing left field right now. He'd be in one of their guys. Well, you're just trying to save the game and save the innings, and that's how it goes. And you're talking about rivalry too. I mean, these are two teams. Everybody in the West is a rival of everybody in the West. So you put it on the Padres and all that. You know, teams like to do it. Teams like to do it to the Dodgers. Teams like to do it to the Padres. Teams like to do it to the teams that are their rivals. And that's it's part of the game. Best revenge, beat them the next day. You want to do something about it? Beat them the next day.
Where does tonight Terry Francona, former Red Sox manager, now managing Cleveland? He's had a lot of health issues as we switch topics here, but his dad played in the big leagues. I can remember when Terry came up as a pretty good hitter, pretty good prospect in his own right. It's funny. I was sitting in when he was managing. I went out to Oakland, and I'm sitting around the pre-game manager discussion. And man, I mean, the intensity when he was the manager for the Red Sox in these questions. I mean, you would have thought he was, the White House chief of staff or are we going to invade? That's like those kinds of people were, I mean, the seriousness of that job. But what do you think of Francona overall as a manager, Ned? Because it just seems like I always felt like he handled Boston about as well as you can handle a big city where stories can just come out of nowhere and take over things. He always seemed like he had total control. Seemed like he had a good rapport with his players, but also a good rapport with the media. He seems like he's a guy who strikes the right balance, where he knows he needs to maintain relationships both ways, but he's all about his guys. That managing job's a tough spot because you're truly a middle manager, and you have to have loyalty to the front office, and then you have to have loyalty to the players, and you have to maintain working relationships with the media. And to do all these things at one time is like juggling, knives, and it's sometimes very difficult. I don't envy baseball managers today. It's a very tough job. What do you think of Tito?
Well, I'm a good friend of Tito's for a long time. He was in Chicago for a year when I was in Chicago. Was a really good hitter. Knee injuries curtailed his ability to play a long time. Didn't have a lot of power, but he could absolute hit. I've known him ever since. I've known him probably 35 years, and somebody who I have the utmost respect for. I think if that Game 7 of the 2016 World Series happens to go the other way, and Cleveland beats the Cubs instead of the other way around, I think you're talking about a cinch Hall of Fame manager.
Wow.
I think he's still a Hall of Fame manager. I think to be able to manage as long as he has to win championships, to win a championship in a city like Boston where he did it a couple times, you have no choice. You lose in Game 7 or you lose to the Yankees in the LCS. You've had a bad year. You could have won 105 games. You've had a bad year. The pressure on managers is immense. I think that he's handled it well. Every time that I read that he's got a little bit of a health issue, I kind of cringe because I have so much respect for him as a manager, but I have even more respect for him as a person. And so, I hope that he does take care. But he's got a great passion for the game. He's smart at what he does. I spent some springs, when he was in Cleveland, I was in LA, just talking the game and this and that spring training game or just catching up. And always a pleasure to be around him. One of those guys that thinks fast. I mean, thinks so fast, and it's got a lot going on all the time in his mind. And as you say, I mean, there's a lot to juggle. It is not an easy job. It used to be that you were the manager of the team for 3 or 4 or 5 hours a day, BP, the game, and a half hour afterwards. It's a 24-hour gig now. It is continuous, and with the added dimension to it, where you would expect your players to play every day, your starting 8, so to speak. And now you've got a lot of platoons, you've got a lot of pinch hitting going on. You saw it tonight again. You got a lot of different things going on. You'll be able to explain that to your players too. And sometimes you may agree with it, and sometimes you may not. Sometimes somebody has told you this is what I want you to do. So the juggling act that a manager has is far different than it was 15, 20 years ago. And it's a high pressure job, certainly, because if the team goes good, people celebrate the players. The team goes bad, people look at the manager and the general manager, even though it's the players that are playing the game. The GM doesn't play the game. There ain't no player managers anymore. They ain't playing the game. But when your team has expectation and they don't meet those expectations, those two people are going to catch the heat for the guys in the uniform. So you got a little extra on you.
Couple last things before we let you go. I mean, I love talking baseball with you. And if people want to join the chat, we'll read a couple of the comments here. Just click the link in the chat and you can join the conversation. But just a few more minutes with Ned Colletti here on this Friday night. You announced, and I was so involved with what we were doing in the first time we had the show that I didn't call more attention to it, didn't call any attention to it. You put out a beautifully crafted 4-picture tweet on opening day, officially announcing that your retirement from the game of baseball. And I didn't ask you about it. I want to ask you about it now. Why now? Why the timing? Why opening day? Because you're still a young enough person. You could be somebody's general manager. You could easily be somebody's assistant general manager. Um, Obviously, you want to step away for your own reasons. I know you got great projects that you're working on, and you have a family and other things that are tugging on your time. But you've had an incredible career in the game, Ned. I'm just kind of wondering. First of all, congratulations on
Thank
an
you.
amazing career. And I'll say this: I think everybody has people in the sport that don't like them, and I've met so many people in baseball. I've never met anybody that doesn't like you. So
Well,
um,
I'm sure there's a few.
they're called agents.
Yeah,
No,
they're certainly on the list. Yeah.
no, but
Well,
why
thank you.
now? And give take a second and kind of verbally reflect on what a ride it's been for you.
Well, it's exceeded all my expectations. You know, I was a young kid that fell in love with the game a long time ago. In fact, my first game I ever went to was in 1961 on this date.
Wow, really?
Tomorrow I celebrate a birthday, so it was on this date in 1961. I remember it as clear as can be, and I was, I think, 6 years old at the time. So that gives you an idea how old I am. So it's, I gave it a lot of thought. I've loved the game. It's been a passion of mine. I am so blessed beyond measure to have had a chance to work a minute, let alone 40 years, and never had to work for a team that wasn't with great ownership and wasn't in a great market. Chicago, the Cubs, historic, the Giants, San Francisco. I turned them down when they first offered me the job, and turned out that I love the spot. I love the place, the people. In fact, in June, I'm gonna be up there and going to a Giant Dodger game, and also I'm taking a lot of the staff that is still working for the Giants. I'm taking them out to dinner.
Very cool.
Probably at Sedini's, a place I used to call your show from. Years ago. Um, so I just thought, I have 40 years. 41 years isn't going to make my career any better. It's like Clayton with the perfect. Not that I'm Clayton, I'm not, but it's just another footnote to it all. And I needed to take a breath. I've had 3 full-time jobs for the last 4 years. I teach at Pepperdine, great university, full-time professor. And for me, that's not easy. I'm not, I'm street smart, but I could not get into a 4-year school at the end of my high school days. No 4-year school in the state of Illinois, and I grew up in Chicago, would take a guy like me. So none of this stuff has been easy. So I do that. I obviously scout for the hockey team down south of San Francisco. They're the Sharks, and we're trying to get that franchise put back into a really great spot, which has been for 95% of Doug Wilson's reign. And so that's important to me as well. And really my family, most of all, they've waited for me. They've let me live my dream. They've let me take care of other people's kids. In essence, all the players that have ever come through that we talk to, Sabes, me, any other, Dusty, and everybody. We're really talking to somebody else's kids. And meanwhile, our own kids are, we're hoping that they're okay, but we're sitting in a city 2,000 miles away, or whatever it'll be. And I've been blessed with 3 little grandkids, and it's important to me to spend time with them. The baseball season doesn't give you that chance. Even if I was going to do 30 or 40 or 50 games instead of the 110 I've been doing on TV the last few years, it still doesn't give you that chance. And I thought, you know what? I've got enough. I've got enough rings. I've got enough successes. My cell phone has got names in it that I never ever thought I would have. I have a cell phone that has Willie Mays' cell phone number in it. Willie Mays, when I would come in with, even with the team I worked for last, he'd say, "I love you, I hate your team." I mean, I got to know Willie, and with the great late Willie Mack, all these guys, Dusty, all these people. It's not lost on me, and it was just, I thought it was time. It was time to, readjust a little bit. Doesn't mean I'll never work in baseball again necessarily. I won't work to the extent that I'm working or worked. I'm not going to do that. But would I do a little bit here and there? Yeah. Would I help out a GM as the old wise owl in the corner with some advice from time to time, quietly? Absolutely, I would do that. But do I need the pace of a season after 40 of them? I don't think so. And so I decided, what, uh, enough's enough. I love peppermint ice cream, pal. If you gave it to me 3 times a day, I'd be sick of it in about 2 weeks. So at some point in time, you gotta close the curtain and move on to do other things. And there's a lot of other things I have on my mind to accomplish. A lot of things with diversity and helping kids out, to get to have the dream that I was able to fulfill. Because it gets tougher and tougher. That's part of the reason I teach, is to try and give back and to try and help people out and trying to be a positive influence, and give them something that they can take with them, and maybe be better off in life because of something I told them, or something like that. So those are the goals. I have been blessed beyond measure. People where I grow up, they don't have the opportunities I've had. And it's not that I had sponsors or I had somebody open the door for me or this or that. No, I had nothing. I had nothing except great parents who taught me great work ethic and taught me integrity and taught me how to help people out and to do the best I could day in, day out. And after a while, all I ever needed was a chance. You give me a chance, I got a chance to compete. I got a chance to get where you want to go. And I got one more thing I got to say.
Yeah.
I got 13 years with the Cubs, and then I came to San Francisco and really didn't know what I was in for. Okay. San Francisco, Chicago, 2,000 miles apart, different places, different cultures, different city, different weather, very much different. And Brian Sabian was a relatively young executive, and so was I, and Bob Quinn was our boss. And I had no idea if it was going to be good or bad. We were still a candlestick. It was like playing baseball at Alcatraz, and and it turned out to be the best time of my career. My relationship with Brian, tremendous. We're like brothers, even though we competed against each other for the 9 years I was a GM. And some years we wouldn't speak to each other until
You guys never made a trade either, did you?
we made one trade. I acquired Mark Sweeney for a minor league player.
Okay, for Travis
It
Dinker.
was like the first Dodger Giant trade in 30 some years.
Right,
But
that's right.
it changed my life, and it changed my world. And I'll forever be grateful to Peter McGowan and Larry Bear and Rob Quinn and Brian Sabian for giving me that opportunity. Even though at the beginning I said, I don't think I can do this. And Brian called me and says, we're going to figure out a way that you can do this. And we spent 11 years together and won a lot of games from 97 on. There was a lot of W's in that column. And it set the stage for a lot of good things that have come since. But I'm at peace with it all. I just want to enjoy my day and have a great day. And great day doesn't mean I have to have pomp and circumstance and meet celebrities or go to big dinners or wake up in an exotic place. No, I just want to be around good people. That's all.
Last one, and since you're going to join us throughout the year at different times, we'll definitely get to so many of the stories. I got to hear the story again about Tommy and sitting in the suite with Tommy. We got to hear some Sinatra. We got to get into a
Oh
bunch,
yeah, we
but I
will.
got to ask you this one because you kind of jogged a thought. What did it mean to you? What did 2010 mean to you? What did 2012 and 14 mean to you? Because those are all your friends. Those are all your scouting friends. Those are all your front office friends. Those are your traveling secretary friends. Those are secretaries in the office. That was, that story. You were pursuing that dream. 2002, you almost got there. 2003, you guys almost had that kind of team. I mean, you took several chances, several runs at it, and you never quite climbed that mountain here in San Francisco. But what was it like for you being elsewhere to see Sabes climb that mountain and all the people that you knew that were still with the Giants? What was that like for you in 2010 and 2012 and 14? I mean,
That is a phenomenal question. I'll tell you.
because where were you in 10, 12, and 14?
Well,
You were
I was a GM of the Dodgers
all 3 years.
from November of '05 until November of 14.
Yeah, so all
So,
3 years. So
yeah,
that's a tough. It's like you can't say I was elated because you were in the
yeah,
competition, but
yeah.
in a
But
way,
I'll tell you honestly how I felt about it.
yeah,
You know, Brian and I both, we wouldn't have had the careers we both had if we didn't compete, and if we weren't relentless in our pursuit of excellence. As tried as that may sound, that is what we both did daily, every day, not just in season, but every day. And I'm working in another place. I've been there for 5 years already. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 was my fifth year as a GM down there. And we had good teams. We went to the playoffs 5 times, got eliminated in 10, I think, from the wild card, maybe the day before the end of the season. Anyway, we had one season like that, and we won 5 other times out of 9, which wasn't bad. Um, and so, if we were playing the Dodgers or we were playing the Giants in the division series, the LCS, like the division series a year ago happens, you know, it's all on. It is going to be as it was last year with Andrew and Farhan, two guys that worked together for a couple of years. It'd be all on. I think if I was able to separate the competitiveness of we're eliminated, we're not playing. So am I going to root against the Giants? Some people in LA took. It's not the first time I've said this, and a writer wrote it like I was a huge Giants fan, which is totally false.
crazy.
But I'm not a Giants fan. Not for a instant. But did I respect Brian Sabian? Did I respect the team of people that I'm taking to dinner in a month and a half? Of
And you
course.
saw the pain in '02. You were part of
Yeah.
it.
So I know how hard it is to win, and that they had a chance to do it. You know what? I can't tell you I was sad that they won it. I was upset that we weren't in it. It's a difference. And and something else that people, the writer in LA, he didn't even care. My son was scouting for the Giants. When
Right,
I
Lou.
left, Dick
Yeah.
Tidrow hired him. And so what am I going to do? Root against my flesh and blood, my oldest child? Root against him because his team was in the World Series and my team didn't make the postseason that year? I don't know who would ever root against their own. I had, and especially if they weren't playing. We see it sometimes in maybe college sports or in other sports where it's the father and the son go, competing against each other, and yeah, it's a different dynamic. But when one is out and one has been eliminated and did everything they possibly could not to be eliminated, but they were eliminated, to go and then root against your flesh and blood. Anybody that wants to think that I was, that I did something wrong, bring it on because I'd like to see if you would if you who feels that way would root against your own family in a situation like that.
I
So
think you root for your. I think you root for your friends. And I met people in football who'd be like, "Hey, Krug, after you've been in this for a few years, you root for your friends. You root for your friends." Um, so the Giants win. Brian Wilson strikes out whoever it was in the ninth inning. Was were you watching it with Lou, or did you pick up the phone?
um,
And like, what? I mean, I don't want to pry too personally, but
yeah,
like, what did you say to your son? This is your son who
I said
who had a dream to
congratulations.
play. He played. He was a baseball
Yeah,
player.
yeah. I
And
said congratulations. I said I'm happy for you. And I texted Sabes. One year it may have. I can't remember which year it was. It may have been 13. We were like neck and neck, Dodgers and Giants, all the way through, and we beat them at the end. And that was the year. That may have been the. I think it was 13. We didn't speak to each other. Okay, all year. And usually we. I know where to
you
find
didn't run
him.
into each other.
No, on purpose. We
Wow.
refused to see each other because we didn't want to, say good luck and not mean it. So
Right.
we'd rather just not even see each other, right?
Right.
So
Right. Right.
we didn't talk to each other or see each other the entire year. And I think it was 13. And we ended up winning. And within an hour of us clinching the division, he calls me and he says, "Congratulations." He said, this is phenomenal. And so, I'm happy for it. Do I wish it was us? Yeah, absolutely. But you know what? It's not us. And so, I wish you the best. Is that wrong? No. How can you make that wrong? I mean, I don't take. You know what? I don't take joy in somebody else's failure or heartache. I find no joy in that. Okay.
Life's too
But
short.
yeah. So you know what? It doesn't mean That doesn't mean I didn't compete. It doesn't mean I didn't compete every day, every day. And I did. Look, thank you for the compliments on my career. I wouldn't have had the career I had coming from where I come from and growing up how I grew up and having the educational struggles that I had to prove myself, continually prove myself. I wouldn't have had any of that without the grace of God and without the ability to compete. So that's the deal.
I remember meeting you in '97 and thinking, "Man, this guy's sharp." And then it was really abundantly clear to me that Sabes had just total confidence in you, and that what you said, you guys were in lockstep. No, nothing ever came between you guys, at least in those years, and it was an awesome thing. And several, the Giants didn't have any lean years in that decade. And a lot of that ballpark, Barry gets a lot of the credit, McGowan and Bear get a lot of the credit, but you and Sabes deserve a lot of the credit because let's be honest, that the Giants of the '90s built momentum, which now resulted in the stadium being built, and now that franchise is on a different plane,
No doubt.
far healthier financially than they were in leading into that decade. And so you guys had to operate under the "we can't win 75 games" kind of a mantra, and you had to be competitive every year. And in a sport where you're relying on performance that fluctuates, it's difficult to be good every year. But you guys competed every year. I don't know what the stat was, but there was a stat there in the late '90s where it was like the Giants had played like 3 meaningless games in like a 5-year stretch.
I think we played
Um,
15 in 9 years.
yeah. So
15 games out of the race in 9 years. There'll be teams this year that are playing. The Diamondbacks played 50 last year
right, right,
in the race. We
yeah,
played 15 in 9 years without the highest payroll. It was
right.
always at least second to the Dodgers inside the division. But Brian, I mean, he was phenomenal and nothing territorial. He continued. My strengths were not his strengths. His strengths were not my strengths, and so we were able to balance each other out. And there's things that he gave me the opportunity to do. When I got to LA and I signed for Cal as my first, Raphael as my first free agent sign. It's not the first time I signed a free agent. It might have been the 100th time I signed a free agent. When I traded Milton Bradley for Andre Ether, it wasn't the first trade I'd ever made. Probably the 15th or 20th trade I had made, thanks to him. Because if I had an idea, he said, "I like it. Go get it done." That's pretty good. But
Yeah.
I got to tell you one quick funny story while we're talking about it.
That
because I
trade,
got
by the way, was with the great Billy Bean, right? Andre
oh
Ethier
yeah, yeah,
for Billy for Milton Bradley.
yeah. So I got a note from him the other day. And I talked to him. I talked to him on the air maybe a month ago. FP Santangelo. So this is back in the candlestick days. And you have the non-tender date in December where players, maybe another 25 become free agents because their teams do not offer them a contract. And we weren't going to find out what the list was until Monday. Well, we didn't have a big payroll. We had to really kind of work around the fringes a little bit. As people say now, they're working the margin really well. So I get somebody from MLB to give me a call late Friday night, and they give me the list. And the guy on the list is FP Santangelo. So Candlestick was a public city, not a public, but it was a city-owned facility. Okay, so we couldn't get in on a weekend unless you called and somebody was going to open up a gate for you or something. We
Right.
couldn't get in. This is like December, right? So Sabes and I drive down to the ballpark. We lived about 15 minutes from each other, me and San Mateo and him in Belmont. And we drive in together and we have to climb the fence. So here's the GM and the assistant GM of the Giants climbing the fence to get into our office. Okay.
Right.
We climb the fence, we get into the office. Now, we don't have a phone number for FP Santangelo. We don't have a phone number for the agent. We have no reference point of anything. But we know he's from Sacramento. So we call directory assistance. And
411.
we ask for Santangelo in the Sacramento area. And the operator says, well, I have one, Frank Santangelo. I said, I'll take it.
Yeah.
And he gave me the number and I dial it up and it was FP's dad. And when I said, this is Ned Colletti from the Giants calling, did I reach FP Santangelo's family or residence? And the dad says, you're kidding me. The Giants are calling for my son. I says, yeah. He goes, oh, I can't wait. Yeah. I'll tell him. And so by Monday, we had him signed. The list came out publicly and we had him signed. But I always tell him, we were so, we needed you so bad. Two guys climbed the fence at Candlestick Park and then made a call on a Saturday to your dad on directory assistance to make a deal happen.
I remember FP
So we did.
well. It's funny, the fighting hydrants, right? It was him and Bernard and Rios,
Yeah.
and that was a great year, '99. I did the post game show, and I remember them saying to me, "Hey, you know what? You're going to be coming out of these games pretty late. We'll give you a pass to play to a park in the players' lot." So, and I'm like, "Oh, great, that's terrific." So I parked in the players' lot. So I'm coming down, and that year, man. FP, Richie, Miller, Kent, maybe not Kent always, but definitely those three guys. JT sometimes. They'd be sitting in the clubhouse talking ball, having a couple of
Oh
pops,
yeah.
having a couple of beers and talking about the game. And, I'd be finished with my post game show and it's 2 hours. We didn't come on for 45 minutes, went for 90 minutes. It'd be like 2.5 hours after the game. These guys would be in the players' parking lot giving each other high fives and talking ball. And it was a really cool rapport that those guys had in '99. That was
We
kind
had
of a special club, that '99 club.
yes, we had a lot of fun. Before that Dodgers series in '97, we talked about this on the
Two
show earlier,
gamer,
the two gamer in September. So
Brian
Sage and I,
Johnson.
about 2:30 every afternoon, we would go and we'd sit in the GM booth for a little while, kind of decompress, maybe power nap for 15, 10 minutes, and we go in there and we sit down and we look on the field. And the new ballpark was coming. They were trying to get referendums passed or something for the new ballpark, or
Right.
maybe they had it passed or whatever, but they had a white line drawn on the field to show how close the seats were going to be at the new ballpark, kind of to
Oh,
entice people.
wow.
Because if you remember, there were
Candlestick.
seat licenses. I think
Yeah.
it was not a publicly funded stadium. It was privately funded for the first time in 40 years or something. So a lot of people had to do a lot of things. And Sabes looks at me and he goes, "Is there a football game here today? What are we doing with all these white lines on the field?" So he called somebody and kind of chewed him out a little bit. What we got the biggest game of our time here tonight, and we got lines all over the place that don't mean anything with the game of baseball. They're showing us where the seats are going to be,
and he went off, and they came down at the ground crew and got the white lines off the field and everything. But I mean, we had so much fun there. I mean, it was great. Dick Tidrow, who passed this past year, one of my our dearest friends. We had that big series. We had like 60,000 people there back to back days, the night game and the day game, right? Barry hits the one off Chan Ho Park, I think, the night before, and then Brian Johnson, hits the game winner. And the next, maybe the next day we're playing Houston or something on a Friday night. I forget who we're actually playing. But, it's a Candlestick. We would have had the long aisles coming down, right?
Right.
Of course, like maybe 70 rows, 60 rows of seats. And Dick Tidrow are sitting there. I mean, we got a chance to win a division now after being terrible for the 2 years before. And Tidrow is counting fans. Oh, there's two more. They're coming in, walking in. And it was like, what an interesting point in time. I loved it. I have.
That was a great season. The 97 season was a great season. I remember seeing you guys in 96 in September at Wrigley, and you guys had Rick Wilkins and Kim Batiste and just some guy named Johnston in the outfield and just all kinds of guys. And 97, you guys went and got all guys in their prime. Mark Lewis, and I think it was Russ Davis and Darrell Hamilton and the late Darrell Hamilton, and really kind of reinvigorated the club. And then 97 was a phenomenal year. And then wasn't Tidrow instrumental in that white flag trade? Wasn't he hanging on the south side in saloons scouting out Ron Schuler?
Sat with Ron Schuler, his buddy in the gym at the Sox, for a week, trying to convince him to give up with Wilson Alvarez, Roberto Hernandez, and
Danny Darwin.
Yeah.
Those are some good memories, man.
Our payroll was tight then. And
yeah.
I remember, Sabes and I, as I've said earlier, we would walk a lot. We would take walks, almost every day of the season, and once in a while in the off season. And the day of the trading deadline, we're up near where he lived at the time, and we're walking through the neighborhood, right? And he goes, we gotta make this deal, but I don't know if we're gonna have the payroll room to do it, And he says, is this one of those deals where we do it and ask for forgiveness later, because it was going to cost us like $1.5 million, which today, you don't even think about $1.5 million.
Sure.
Back then, you thought of $1.5 million as like 30 million today. And I looked at him, I says, well, after we make this deal, the baseball world is going to know it's for real. And so worst comes to worst, we'll be able to find another gig, I think. So,
I remember the White Sox took a lot of heat. They took a lot of heat because they made that trade. They were 2.5 out.
Yeah.
I think the month later they were still 2.5 out.
Yeah.
And people on the south side didn't let them forget it. What's that?
Ron Schuler didn't think they'd get past the first round, even if they made it. So we got some good players. You got Bobby Howry.
Yeah.
You got Keith Folk.
Yes, who had huge guts.
The Red Sox finishing off a World Series.
Lorenzo Barcelo never made it.
Yeah, Mike Caruso was third rookie of the year, and then didn't have much of a career after that. But a lot of great memories there. I mean, phenomenal time I had there.
Absolutely.
And I think I turned it down for a minute at the beginning because I wasn't sure, and then I found out, hey, you know what? You do leave your heart in San Francisco.
Well, you know what? It's funny. Every time your name comes up, there's so many people here that love you, and you made a huge impact here on the community. So, hey, on that note, we'll call it a night. I said we were get out of here an hour, and I lied. We went over, but you know what? It's talking ball with you. I lose track of time sometimes, but maybe we'll do it again next week. And awesome to talk ball with you. Have a great weekend, Ned, and we'll talk to you soon.
You too, Larry. Always a pleasure, pal.
Take care.
Yeah. Cheers.
See ya.
Yeah, never met a man I've been scared of. Careful, you gon' get exactly what you asked for. Here for whatever.